All right, welcome back to another episode of the Psychopedia podcast. I am here with my sensational co-host,
Investigator Slater.
I'm turning over a new leaf.
I will take that intro.
Yeah, you know why?
No.
For some reason, I lost this along the way where...
Respect for me?
No. No. Listen, I'm not saying I'm going to be perfect, but...
No one who walks God's earth is.
God's green earth.
Shit.
Yeah, it's okay.
It's a Jay-Z quote. You know that.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Pretty good of me, though.
Very good.
Okay.
You're surprising.
I know.
Yeah, you're full of things that I don't think you know or should know.
Yeah, I know. I surprise myself sometimes. It comes out. I'm like, whoa.
Yeah.
Okay, but continue with your
little intro, idiot.
No, stop. I've already cut you off so many times. I'm sorry. I told you I'm very hyper today.
You are. She's on one. So I am going to, I realized when I was like maybe 22 or so that like, you shouldn't have to be mean to be funny. If you have to be mean, maybe you're not as funny as you think you are.
That is an awesome tidbit. It actually really is.
Damn, right up front.
So my younger son was trying to insult or annoy my older son today when they were walking out to the bus.
Yeah.
And he goes, "Your friend looks like a dead bear." Like threw my son's friend under the bus to upset my son.
Yeah.
You know, and Dave opened the door and he screamed out, "You don't have to pull somebody down to bring yourself up."
Nice.
Which was a sick lesson. Yeah.
Firefighter Dave coming in hot,
Yep.
pun intended, with the lessons.
Very good.
So yeah, I'm just going to try and, with Damian, I got to shit talk him because it's got to come out some way.
What's your love language with him?
Exactly. But I may still razz you here and there.
I'm here for it. I've signed up for it.
Yeah. Well, we're here for another episode and we are thrilled to be here. As you know, as I know, as you all know, you're here with us. And it's just, I can't wait for this week's episode, mainly because I don't even know what the episode's about. You're slap happy right now, though.
So here's what I think is happening.
Yeah.
I obviously know what the episode is about.
Of course.
And it is particularly horrendous.
Oh.
And I think psychologically something is happening that my psyche, whatever, is trying to create some kind of balance because it's going to go so low
It's so
that
bad.
it has to bring me up real high right now so that I level out and don't bottom out.
You might crash, though.
I might. It's a horrific case.
Well, now I feel very different about the episode.
Oh, no.
Oh, I'm scared.
Well, there's some very fascinating topics that I think, which I know for sure you will run with, which I'm looking forward to.
Good.
But I'm not going to obviously go into it right this second because I'm going to go into it for the next hour.
You know what just made me feel happy? The fact that you probably, when you're researching cases, come across stuff and you're like, oh, Tank is going to love this.
Oh, yeah, this is one of them. Just the topics, obviously.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Oh,
like
my
if you
goodness.
see something in the research, you're like, oh, he's going to like that.
And sometimes when I'm rehearsing with Firefighter Dave, he'll be like, oh, dude. I wish I could be there to hear what Tank's going to say.
Well, he is. He is in spirit and he is in ear.
When it releases on Wednesday.
Exactly.
Yes.
So if you're here for the first time, welcome. If you're here for the 100th time, welcome home.
Freak.
And if you are appreciative of what we do, one way you can help us keep the steam going is to just do a couple of little clicks and taps here and there. Subscribe to the podcast on wherever you listen. Subscribe on YouTube. Share it with a friend. Maybe, help expand our reach so that we can grow our family of freaks.
Organically, and that's the best way to do it. Just word of mouth.
Listen, we trust you to choose the person. I'm not going to micromanage that, okay? We trust you. Maybe someone who likes comedy or someone who likes true crime or someone who likes both. Maybe they'll like this podcast. So if you love it and they love you and you love them, maybe they'll love the podcast. I'm just saying thank you in advance. TIA.
Very good.
So listen, you're subscribed. You've shared it. On YouTube, you've done your part and left a heart, okay? We're all caught up. If you love us and you're not getting enough of us, you can head on over to patreon.com/psychopediapod where there is still a 7-day free trial. You can go in there, peek around, see if you like the stuff. If you like it, stay. If you don't, no problem. Listen to as much as you can before the week expires. I want that for you. Okay, I want you to see what's going on there before you commit. I understand. It's money. It's hard-earned money, and we don't take that lightly. So go in there, check it out, see what you think, and then maybe sign up for the full year because there's a discount on that. Anyway, so In that same vein, I always read off a couple of Patreon names. This week, they are dedicated to you.
Me?
Yes. I
Yes.
chose ones that really are going to just
It's really actually very cute that you have a theme. 'Cause
tickle your fancy.
You did this last time too for our bonus episode.
Yeah.
You said you were picking ones that exclusively came from a different episode. It was the whole snoodling theme, which
Yeah.
was very funny. And this is your second time picking a theme, and I'm here for it.
Yeah. Ban vanilla ice cream on apple pie. Welcome to the Patreon.
Amen. Yes. Louder for the people in the back.
Madison Swain. Hello, Madison.
Hi, Madison.
Banya.
Banya's beautiful.
Or Banja. But I believe I want it to be Banya.
However, it's beautiful.
Banja. Also, before I forget, shout out to the person who I said I was going to say your Patreon name, but I can't remember who you are, so I'm not doing it. But this is for you.
Okay.
You know who you are.
Just message us and we'll hit you next time.
Yes. Okay. Amanda May.
Hi, Amanda.
Cashtastic.
Feeling that everywhere.
Molly Weiss.
Hey, Molly.
English girl pronouncing my English words.
Hell yeah. Very good.
Yeah, thanks for that, which is like a double entendre because obviously I said English, but you know, the way that people pronounce English words or UK words is tricky.
Well, you said English when you were roasting me for not being able to speak properly.
Yeah, but then she's an English girl pronouncing her English words,
Oh,
meaning like the towns or Lobau or whatever the fuck, Luff-Buff, whatever it is. Laptop, pitbull, hoodie, let's go!
Oh my God, you're in my business.
And I don't know if this is going to make it into the episode, but it is, shout out to a sex worker hunting.
Yowza.
I know it's from an episode. I can't remember what it is. It's a callback to an older episode, and we appreciate you listening. Weird way of displaying it, but hey, welcome to the show. All right. So without any further ado, I would like to hear about this week's case.
On a cold November afternoon in 2013, a 5-week-old baby boy suddenly stopped breathing.
Oh.
He choked on the liquid vitamin that his mother administered moments earlier, an intended act of love and protection that she had done so many times before as part of their daily routine together. But this time, the liquid vitamin shot down the wrong pipe, and since the baby was too young to clear his own throat, he simply collapsed in his mother's arms instead. Panic surged through the mother like a tidal wave as the baby went limp in her now trembling arms. She ran outside into the biting November cold, her breath visible in the frigid air as she screamed for the baby to breathe while ripping open his onesie in a desperate attempt to shock him awake with the cold air. But the attempt was futile, and the baby remained motionless. The mother's legs felt weak and were barely able to support her as she rushed back inside the house, eyes wide with terror and adrenaline coursing through her veins. What?
Hi, Jessica, if you're listening. I'm thinking of something that she did once when my older son was choking. It fucking blew my mind. He was young. He was like 3 or whatever, 3 or 4. He started choking on something. She grabbed his ankle, whipped him upside down with one hand, and started slapping him on the back, and it came out. I was like, where did you learn that?
You snap into...
Exactly. It was like...
instinct takes over.
Oh, I was like, that's one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. Thank you for knowing how to do that in your DNA.
I was just going to say, when you see nature doing what it was intended to do, a mother protecting her child and just instinctively knowing how to do that, it also reminds you that, like, we're all just animals.
It was, I mean...
You know what I mean? Like...
it was the smoothest grab. It was no, like, let me switch hands here. She was like...
Or what do I do? It was, right.
Instant,
so,
yes.
That's what you're hearing with this story.
Yeah, of course.
More or less, okay? The mother grabbed her phone with fumbling fingers and managed to call 911, her voice unrecognizable as she screamed for help. Every second felt like an eternity as she begged, pleaded, cried, and even prayed, desperate for her baby to take a breath. When emergency responders arrived, they quickly took the baby from the mother's arms to attempt CPR. One of the firefighters who arrived on the scene had to physically restrain the mother, who was desperately trying to reach out for her despondent child, now lying on the kitchen table surrounded by paramedics. Then, within seconds that felt like hours, a miraculous sound broke through the chaos.
Thank God.
The baby's cry. It started as a faint whimper and grew into a robust wail. The louder he screamed, the broader the mother's smile grew, tears of relief streaming down her face. Her heart, which had seemed to stop along with her baby's breath, began to beat again. In fact, it pounded in celebration. The world, which had momentarily lost all sense and order, clicked back into place.
Said 5-week-old, right?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Her baby was going to be okay, and with that realization, her life could continue. The intense and immediate reaction of that mother when her child was in danger was deeply ingrained, as we've touched upon, pure instinct by design from whatever force or being or set of events created life on Earth. That mother almost had no choice but to protect her child. Her body took action even when her mind felt detached. Autopilot. And I know this to be true because that mother was me.
No.
Yep.
Oh my God.
Mm-hmm. One of the worst / best days of my life.
I love when you do that.
I know. You really felt that. Yeah. It was horrific. It was absolutely horrific. So what happened was I went to shoot his vitamin in his mouth, which I had done literally every day since birth. And he was crying. And I thought, great, his mouth is already open. He's my first child. You know, unfortunately, he learns the hard way, as do I. Right? So I shot it down his throat and he collapsed immediately. I've learned since then that he was too young to clear his own throat and they collapse. I thought the worst, as you can imagine. But it was incredible how my body moved when I swear to God I was floating above the whole situation. Like ripped open his clothes, ran outside in the cold air, one hand's reaching for the phone. Like everything happened immediately because nothing else happens except protecting your child.
Oh, yeah. And I love that that's one of those perspective things. Like, typically a child crying can be a noise that irritates people.
Oh, it was music.
I actually use that as like a litmus test for what kind of shape I'm in emotionally. Like being on a plane with a crying baby. If you're getting mad, you might have some work to do on your own irritability / edginess.
Well, just try and have empathy.
Yes, of course, for the parents, but also the kid. It's going to cry. It's what they do.
Right.
But I always tell people, like, when they come in and they're trying to get sober and they're feeling pain for the first time because now there's nothing to numb it. Like, imagine you were paralyzed for 10 years. Then all of a sudden you felt burning in your feet, like pins and needles.
The intensity is through the roof.
No, you'd be doing backflips because then you know that there was feeling coming back.
Right, but it's so intense.
So try and see the pain as a good thing, as a sign that you are alive and you are on the right path and healing. You know?
Yeah. Maternal and or paternal love and protectiveness are fundamental aspects of human nature.
Thank you for adding paternal. I know it wasn't in the script. Thank you.
It was, by the way.
Oh, it was?
Sure was.
Okay.
Deeply rooted in both biological and emotional factors. And this bond drives a parent to extraordinary lengths to ensure their child's well-being, even if it comes at the expense of their own safety and comfort. Your child comes first. So when this natural instinct is reversed, and a mother, in this case, intentionally and maliciously takes the precious life that she created, it not only shocks, but it profoundly disgusts on a primal level.
Like I am right now.
And the case of Louise Porton, which we are delving into today, exemplifies this horrific deviation from nature because Louise Porton displayed chilling indifference, astounding self-centeredness, and calculated lethal cruelty towards her, not one, but two young daughters, Lexi, just 3 years old, and Scarlett, only 17 months old. And her deplorable actions turned Louise from a giver of life to a dealer of death. This is the case of Louise Porton, mother of murder.
It spells out mom.
It does, doesn't it?
But we don't do acronyms on this show.
No. So just a word of caution. Please listen with caution to this one. It's devastating and you will feel things. Louise Porton, born in 1996, grew up in the picturesque region of Warwickshire, southeast of Birmingham in the UK. Known for its charming countryside, historic towns, and rich cultural heritage, this area provided a beautiful backdrop for Louise's early childhood spent with a very tight-knit family, including a mother, father, and 2 siblings. The family often spent time with extended family as well, including aunts, uncles, cousins, and a grandmother named Joy, fostering what should have been a strong foundation built on the strength of love and family ties. However, Despite the supportive environment, Louise exhibited troubling behavior from a very early age. She demonstrated erratic, aggressive behavior and emotional volatility that went beyond typical childhood difficulties. She lashed out viciously at her siblings and would intentionally isolate herself from her cousins and relatives at family functions, including regular Sunday gatherings at her grandmother's house. But even beyond that, Louise had a nature, almost gifted ability to manipulate, which manifested in insidious ways. She constantly lied to her parents and regularly displayed a disturbing penchant for inflicting pain without detection. For example, Louise would dig her sharp nails into her cousin's skin when no one was looking, effectively mastering the art of being a silent attacker from a very early age.
Oh.
If anyone attempted to sit near her at Sunday dinner, Louise would often threaten, "Go away or I'll smash your face." Beneath the facade of a typically appearing child, Louise concealed a dark and secretive malevolence that many in her family had begun to detect. Around the age of 11, Louise began to exploit her elderly grandmother, Joy, by stealing jewelry and money that Joy relied upon to live.
11?
Yes, very young to exhibit the behavior that she was exhibiting.
Yeah.
When caught, Louise never accepted responsibility or apologized and lacked all signs of remorse, shame, guilt, or regret. This behavior suggested very early on either an inability to comprehend the wrongness of her actions or a complete lack of care, both indicative of antisocial behavior traits.
Yeah.
Then, during this time, a significant traumatic event occurred. Louise's mother, Sharon, abandoned the family to be with a new man, traumatizing Louise and leaving her with a deep and long-lasting sense of rejection and emotional instability.
And abandonment.
Exactly. Without doubt, Louise internalized her mother's abandonment and thereafter struggled immensely with feelings of unworthiness, rejection, and very low self-esteem. At age 11, which is where we are in the case for Louise, children are developing their sense of identity and self-worth.
Yeah.
And the sudden loss of a primary caregiver under those circumstances can affect relationships throughout a person's entire life,
Sure.
making it difficult to form and maintain healthy attachments. In Louise's case, this absolutely seemed to be the case. And as Louise grew older, her relationships with boys and men began to reflect her low self-esteem and fear of rejection. She exhibited promiscuous behavior and sought attention and validation through sex. And by the age of 18, it is reported that she developed a full-blown sex addiction. Sex addiction, also known as hypersexuality or compulsive sexual behavior, is characterized by an excessive preoccupation with sexual thoughts, urges, or behaviors that negatively impact an individual's life.
Or histrionic sexual personality disorder.
What? Dr. Sinatra? You want to expand?
Yeah, we did talk about that in an episode, but I'm not going to tell you which one it was because it's the one we're doing for Unhinged today.
Oh.
So that's why it's so fresh in my mind. Don't give me that much credit.
I'm still impressed, as I always am, when you retain information, because we talk about a lot of things.
We do.
And I don't know. I'm actually not surprised, though, because you're learned.
I'm learned.
So this addiction often stems from psychological issues that include, as we mentioned, low self-esteem, trauma, and a need for validation, which then often leads to a cycle where the temporary relief and validation gained through sex are followed by feelings of guilt and shame, further perpetuating the desire or need for sex.
Yep.
In Louise Porton's case, her early trauma of abandonment by her mother likely contributed to her compulsive need for control and affirmation. Sex became a means for her to gain a sense of worth and power, attempting to compensate for the emotional void left by her unstable childhood. Pop quiz. In the UK, which is where this case took place, what percentage of the population struggles with sex addiction? A, 3 to 6%, B, 13 to 15%, C, 30 to 35%.
I'm trying to go through my knowledge of addiction statistics in general. I feel like it has to be A, 3 to 6%.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct, yes.
Yeah.
A 2021 report from the National Health Service, NHS, indicated that around 3 to 6% of adults might experience some form of sexual addiction or compulsive sexual behavior.
And if you're listening, before you say that's too small of a number, just realize that sex addiction is defined differently than someone who just
sleeps around
or like gets validation through sex or attention or whatever. Like it's It's like comparing a person who drinks every weekend to an alcoholic. It's like it's just the motivation's different, the outcome is different.
Right. Well, I thought you could shed light throughout this episode on addiction in general, because I think that's why I was saying earlier on that I thought you'd have a lot to say, because so much of the conversation surrounding Louise Porton has to do with sex addiction.
Yeah,
we're gonna look at it through many different lenses. I actually question, which I'd like to not get into at this second, if that's okay. But I actually question whether or not she had a true addiction or not. We'll put that on ice and we'll thaw it out later.
Okay.
So many individuals begin experiencing symptoms of sex addiction or compulsive sexual behavior in their teenage years, but most do not seek help until their mid-30s, which I thought was interesting. In terms of comorbidity, sex addiction then co-occurs with other mental health disorders such as depression, anxiety, and obsessive compulsive disorder. It is also frequently associated with other addictive behaviors, including substance abuse and compulsive spending.
It's also very closely related to gambling. The gambling addict is addicted not to the feeling of gambling, they're addicted to the feeling of losing, which is why they are up and then they chase it down until they're in, negative 2,000% of what they started with. Right. They're process addictions. Obviously, there's an outcome as well, but like one of the hard parts of getting sober is that like you don't get excited anymore. You don't get to like call your drug dealer and then drive over there and be excited and anticipate it the whole time.
The whole experience is
That's
gone.
part of it for sure. But the gambling is, it's risk oriented, and sex addiction is, as I'm sure we'll hear about, risk oriented, where it's like whatever, if you start looking at porn at an early age where it's just pictures, it's like that doesn't do it anymore. And then you do go on and on and on until the risk keeps climbing up with the
escalation of the behavior.
Escalation, I was going to say progression of the disease, whatever you want to call it. So that's a huge part of it.
Yeah. So as a now newly minted adult with an alleged sex addiction, and again, I say alleged for reasons that we're going to explore shortly, Louise discovered that she could monetize her sexual interactions with men. She joined websites and dating apps to cast a wider net around thirsty men and posted pictures in various outfits and costumes, or simply wearing her birthday suit to entice a variety of different customers. Ooh. Louise also signed up with a UK-based freelance modeling agency called Port from August 2016 through November 2017, where she created a profile advertising her specialty in cosplay and erotic glamour. Pop quiz.
Okay.
What was her profile name on Port?
Ooh.
A, Lollipop. B, Nice and Easy Louise. C, Lickety Spit.
Lickety Spit. What was the first one? Lollipop? Squeezy Louise? What was it?
Nice and Easy Louise or Lickety Spit?
Nice and Easy Louisiana or Lickety Spit. Fuck it. I don't know. Lollipop.
Yes.
Okay.
That's 2 for 2.
The other ones are too comical.
Oh, feck. I'm just too funny.
Yeah.
On her profile, she stated, quote, "I'm open to all types of photo shoots, so just ask me and you never know. I've modeled for about 2 years, a lie. I'm an easy person to get along with, also a lie. And reliable, another lie."
Yeah.
End quote. She also mentioned that she would provide extra benefits and kinky sex acts for more money during these photo shoots. In fact, for the low rate of just £300, you could, quote, "do whatever you wanted with her." Now, listen, this isn't even in my script. No shade on sex workers or people who have transactional sex if it's consensual and done safely.
Yeah.
Just mentioning that. It's what she goes on to do sort of in conjunction with this lifestyle. Obviously, that is not great.
Yeah. Okay.
By this point in her life, Louise had become estranged from nearly all of her family. Notably, she refused to visit her grandmother, Joy, during her final moments and did not attend her funeral after Joy's passing in April of 2016. Joy had assumed the role of a mother figure following Louise's own mother's departure from the family.
Yeah.
So Louise's decision to sever ties during her grandmother's final days was particularly callous and revealed her apparent lack of empathy and a troubling emotional distance that speaks volumes about her lack of character. Then, when Louise turned 18 years old, a significant event occurred. She became a mother after giving birth to her first child, a little girl named Lexi Draper. Lexi's father, Chris Draper, had very little involvement in Lexi's life, largely or almost entirely due to Louise's controlling nature, which made it difficult for him to maintain contact in spite of his desire or genuine efforts to do so. Then, about 19 months later, in August of 2016, Louise gave birth to their second child, another beautiful little girl named Scarlett.
Same guy.
Same guy.
Okay.
Louise forbade Chris from ever even meeting Scarlett,
What?
and even went so far as taking another step towards dissuading him from attempting to actively father his new child. Pop quiz. What did Louise do? A, she filed a restraining order against Chris after falsely accusing him of sexually abusing the children. B, she gave Scarlett a different last name in an effort to drive a wedge between Chris and the baby. C, she called Chris while speeding in a car with the children and threatened to crash if he didn't promise to keep his distance.
C?
No.
B?
Yes. Louise named her daughter Scarlett Vaughn, cut Chris off completely from both children, and moved into government housing in a place called Rugby, which is located in the West Midlands. She and the girls lived in what's known as a bedsit, which I believe is what Americans would call a studio apartment. It's where the living room, kitchen, and bedroom are all in one space.
Yeah.
It's infuriating, to say the least, that Louise fought so hard to keep her daughters away from Chris when you will sadly learn that she never wanted them around her. She never wanted them in the first place. And even worse, she didn't intend to keep them around long term.
Yeah. When people use kids as pawns in relationships, I want to fucking smash them in the face.
It's awful. Just obviously completely victimizing the children.
It's typically like, oh, well, of course you're using the kids as a pawn. And of course you're not with the person you made the children with because you're impossible and horrible. So this is just another extension of that. And it's obvious why the relationship didn't work out because you're a bad person.
And she was never looking for a family or a relationship, and
what was she doing?
She just brought innocent children into this.
She was so young.
The storm of her life.
She 21?
Yeah, 18 and about that, yeah.
Wow.
Louise despised the role of motherhood and harbored deep resentment towards her daughter's very existence. All of those pesky responsibilities and emotional demands that came with being a parent clashed violently with her manipulative, self-centered tendencies. With 2 children dependent on her, Louise found herself trapped. The freedom to live a selfish life was no longer within reach. She could no longer indulge in carefree nights of partying with men, freely sell her body, or pursue her constant need for attention and validation without the weight of her daughters bearing down on her. Again, just to make it clear, no shade on transactional sex if it's consensual between 2 people, shade on people who are resentful that they have children because all they want to do is get paid for sex. Shade on anybody who resents their children for anything.
Yeah. You're the adult.
Right. Exactly.
Being resentful at a child is like being resentful at a tree.
Right. I understand struggling with parenthood. I'm not judging that.
That's not what you're talking about.
That's not what I'm talking about. I just want to make it clear.
No.
Right.
I didn't think that's what you were talking about at all.
Okay. I'm so sensitive, obviously, so I always want to make sure that I'm being understood.
No, I think there's a type of person that we're both probably thinking of or speaking about right now that is just can't seem to put themselves second to the life that they brought in.
Right, exactly. I absolutely have somebody in mind as you're saying that. And I think also that's why this case is so personal to me, you know, because I was personally involved in this situation that I'm thinking about. And I remember speaking with this woman and being like, I just will never be able to understand you. Like you can sit here and explain away your choices. At the end of the day, your children are never first.
Yeah,
fuck off.
Count your lucky stars.
Right.
You don't understand it.
True. With each day that passed, Louise's need for absolute control was becoming more and more pronounced. Cutting her daughters off from their father wasn't enough. She needed more control over the situation, more focus on her, more to work with in the way of garnering attention and manipulating those around her. And life for beautiful little Lexi and Scarlett inside that tiny apartment with their unloving, resentful, callous mother was at best inappropriate and traumatizing, and of course, at worst, eventually, deadly. Louise would bring clients back to the bedsit and simply instruct the various men to keep quiet while having sex with her as the children lied just a few feet away.
Sleeping? Or maybe not. Who knows?
Maybe not. Not only was this behavior inappropriate.
It's fine if they're sleeping.
And disgusting. But it was also incredibly dangerous.
Yeah.
Any of those men could have been aggressive with her or the children. The environment that these little girls were forced to exist in had become a harrowing mix of neglect and endangerment, deprived of the love and security that every child deserves. When Louise wasn't screwing men in front of her toddler and baby, she would leave them with her landlord or with her sister Karen, who was the only family member that she was still speaking with at the time. And as a last completely horrific, irresponsible resort, but one that Louise had no problem going with, she'd leave the children home alone in order to meet up with men. Louise even texted her sister once saying that she planned to give the babies sleeping pills before leaving them alone in the apartment. 17 months old and 3 years old. Just as a reminder. Louise Porton was a selfish woman who would not or could not, depending on your thoughts about this, put her children before her need to have sex with men.
And being selfish is part of being a human being. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
It's the being like ignorance, right? I used to think ignorance was like the worst thing you could possibly be, ignorant. It just means without knowledge. Willful ignorance is a different story. She's exhibiting willful selfishness or belligerent selfishness where she knows that it's not the right thing to do, but she just can't get out of her own way.
Very well said. Per usual.
How do you spell per usual, by the way?
P-E-R. U-S-H is how I would pronounce it. Spell it.
Per ush, got it.
How would you spell it?
I would not. I saw a debate.
Gun to your head. How are you spelling it?
I would just spell out usual and get shot in the head.
Oh, okay. Checks out.
Yeah, U-J-E.
Oh, what's fancy? Penchant.
Usual.
You got a penchant for fancy spelling.
Yeah, huge.
So many sources emphasize the fact that Louise was a full-blown sex addict and that she was addicted to it and she needed to have it, and her kids came second because she was an addict. Here's where I get confused, and maybe you can shed light on this.
Yeah.
If this was truly a case of sex addiction, again, as the media portrays it 9 times out of 10, then it was a compulsive behavior that Louise could not control despite the negative consequences.
Yep.
And we can feel angry by the horrific consequences of her behavior, but it complicates things a bit when you consider why she was doing it. Because if she was an addict and addiction is a disease, maybe she couldn't control it, right? I wanted to just talk about sex addiction for a second. So it can hijack the brain's reward system to create a cycle where the addict seeks more and more of the behavior to achieve the same feeling, which you talked about, of reward or escape. If this were the case, and sex was Louise's way of coping with unresolved emotional pain and a lack of control in other areas of her life, then the escalation of her actions was almost inevitable. While this doesn't excuse her actions, it does provide a framework to understand how her behavior could have become so destructive. So we can consider the depth of her psychological struggles while still condemning the devastating impact on her innocent children. But I'll be honest, in my completely unprofessional opinion, I'm just not sure that she was actually a sex addict.
Why?
Because I think...
Based on her behavior, because I can see it so clearly.
So correct me if I'm wrong. There's a difference between compulsive sexual behavior rooted in addiction and weaponizing sex to control and manipulate and get what you want.
I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think that her behavior, just with a little bit that I know about it, that she started, working on the websites, and then she went into real life sex work, and then she started bringing the guys back home, and then she started leaving her kids home alone. It's escalating risk, which goes hand in hand with the behavior. And if you, there's a line in the big book that says, where it's in a letter that a doctor wrote in the 1930s when alcoholism was just do cocaine and get off, stop doing it. I'll give you cough syrup. There's cocaine in it. Obviously, you're going to stop drinking now, right? Or I'll get the demons out of you. Frothy emotional appeal seldom suffices, is what he says. And the first thing I think of when he says that is a person at the door of their house with a suitcase leaving because they're getting thrown out and their kids are crying, Daddy, don't leave. And he can't not leave. It just doesn't do the trick. I can understand why people would look at that and go, "What the fuck?" And you don't have to do anything, but acceptance doesn't mean approval. So even if you go, "Okay, yeah, wow, that sucks that person is going through that," doesn't mean you have to like it. Just means that there are other forces at work here that you're lucky you don't have to deal with in your own
Right.
life.
I guess, it comes down to, and I don't know if we know this, if she was choosing that lifestyle or
Nobody would choose that
that lifestyle was choosing her. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah. And there's no way to know. She's the only person who can
Exactly.
diagnose herself.
Exactly. I'm not professionally trained in this area and I don't have personal experience, but just based on the research, I'm looking at it and I'm like, something about her intention or like the root of where this is coming from, for whatever reason, feels.
Well, there's so much at work in addiction. There's environmental factors. There's, the way you were raised, which is in conjunction with environmental, but also kind of different. There's brain chemicals. Like I believe that addicts get a greater flood of feel-good chemicals than a normal person does. So like when the first day I drank was the greatest day of my life. The first day you drank was probably like, I don't even remember it.
Right. Well, I do because I choked, but yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't the day that you went, oh, this is how I'm going to get through life.
Right. No.
So,
So tough.
there could very well be something with how the cascading effect of brain chemicals on each other, the synergy of them together. Who knows? I have no idea.
So maybe until this point, we feel a little empathy towards Louise at this point, if she's doing these, things and I don't know.
I always feel bad for everybody.
I know I do too, but
Yeah.
she's so bad. Oh my God. We didn't even get to it yet. Like this part, I don't judge at all, right? Like I said, consensual sex work, whatever.
Yeah.
If it's addiction, I certainly don't blame her. You know what I mean? It's just what she goes on to do. I just can't.
Yeah, I'm not saying I'm going to like it, but I do like, what I'm saying is I feel bad that she felt she had to do that.
Right.
What level of, like when somebody kills himself,
right.
you feel bad.
Right.
You think, whenever, this drives me nuts, when someone kills themselves and you see people at the wake, they're like, I don't know, man, I've been depressed before. I never fucking thought well, maybe you haven't been that depressed.
I mean, how do you compare yourself? Like this person is.
You can't, everyone, I know it's common, it's human nature to compare your whatever to someone else's whatever, but to put your darkness up against somebody who killed themselves' darkness is not a fair comparison because they're not here and you're still here. So maybe yours was more manageable and you can't say, I don't know, I would never do that.
Maybe they had different tools and lacked the tools needed to deal with the same issue that you're dealing with.
Yeah, the person I'm thinking of, 100, that was like the most glaring example of someone who didn't have the tools. He didn't have even the vocabulary to describe what was going on.
That is so heartbreaking.
Just kept saying it's not good. It's not good for like 2 years.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
As time went on and Lexi and Scarlett grew to become more and more of a burden on Louise and her pursuit of money and men, Louise's behavior continued to escalate. She began to physically lash out at Lexi and Scarlett, who were now, again, about 3 and 17 months old at this point in the case. She'd violently grab the girls by their arms if they misbehaved and drag them across the room while screaming and cursing at them to obey, or else she'd really give them something to cry about. She hit and cursed at the children and made no effort to hide the fact that she viewed them as a hindrance rather than the treasures that they were. Now, Louise was indeed reported to social services multiple times, but apparently no investigations ever followed. Then things took a dark turn on January 2nd, 2018, because this is when 21-year-old Louise texted her sister Karen to indicate that Lexi was having some kind of quote-unquote fit. Karen repeatedly urged Louise to call an ambulance, but Louise procrastinated, suggesting that everything would probably be fine soon and that she'd just wait it out.
Yeah, see what happens.
It wasn't her life.
What does she mean fit, do you know?
No, we don't. They don't describe what it is, but based on what happens moving forward, I would venture to say that she fainted. She lacked oxygen. Eventually, Louise decided to call 111, the UK's non-emergency helpline, when she should have called 999. Everything is just so psychologically telling.
Yeah.
Louise told the 111 operator that her daughter had been watching television when she suddenly stopped breathing and had not been breathing for several minutes by that point.
Jeez.
Of course, upon hearing this, the operator immediately arranged for an ambulance to be sent to Louise's home. However, Louise shockingly called back to cancel the ambulance, indicating that her father, whom she wasn't even in touch with, would be available to drive them to the hospital in just a few hours.
What? Wow.
Eventually, Louise drove Lexi to a hospital in Rugby, Warwickshire, and the doctors were absolutely baffled by Lexi's breathing difficulties and simply could not determine what could have caused such a serious, drastic health decline.
Oh, so she can breathe.
When Louise called 111, Lexi wasn't breathing.
Okay.
Then she started breathing again, but was very labored.
Yeah.
Ultimately, medical staff diagnosed Lexi with a chest infection and prescribed her antibiotics. Then, Lexi was discharged from the hospital at 6 a.m. the next morning and released back into the care of her mother. Just 2 days later, on January 4th, Louise called 111 again to report that Lexi, quote-unquote, had a fit. This time, paramedics were discharged to the home. And when they arrived at the apartment, they immediately saw that little Lexi was in a dire state. She was lying flat on her back in what appeared to be a deep state of unconsciousness. They immediately rushed over to the child to administer CPR and incredibly were able to successfully resuscitate her.
Wow.
Lexi was immediately taken to the hospital by ambulance, where doctors continued to remain baffled as to what exactly physically was going on with this child. Pop quiz.
Okay.
While Lexi was being examined by a group of concerned doctors after her terrifying near-death experience, what was Louise doing?
Let's fucking hear it.
A, creating a profile on a sex-for-hire website called Naughty Nymphs. B, stealing a wallet from an unattended purse in the ER waiting room. C, taking topless selfies in the bathroom.
See?
Yeah. Yep.
Crazy.
Unbelievable. She also began sexting with a photographer on a website and describing the types of sex acts that she'd be willing to perform for cash during her photo shoot. All while her child was being worked on by a team of doctors trying to determine why she stopped breathing.
Where's her 17-month-old this whole time?
Good question. I'm assuming with the landlady, because oftentimes Louise would leave her with the landlady. Once again, regrettably, sweet Lexi was discharged from the hospital and released back into the care of her mother, which wound up being the final nail in her tiny coffin. Because 12 days later, on January 14th, 2018, the unthinkable occurred. The day started like any other ordinary day, and CCTV footage from 6 p.m. that evening captured Louise walking into her apartment building with Lexi and Scarlett in tow, who appeared healthy, walking, totally normal. They each had on little pink jackets and remained blissfully unaware of the danger and betrayal that would befall both of them. Nothing in the footage to suggest that either girl was unwell, uncomfortable, in pain, or incapacitated. Yet, shortly before 1 a.m., Louise called emergency services once again on Lexi, a call that I've heard, and that went like this. The operator asked Louise, "Is the patient breathing?" Louise, "No." End of. There's no screaming, no hysterics, no crying, no demanding that help be sent immediately, just a composed woman answering questions about the precarious status of her child's literal life. The operator then asked, "Who is it we're talking about?" Louise said, "Lexi. She's 3.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, like...
She's calling to make an appointment at fucking...
Yeah, I have here...
Blaster Funcraft or something.
Exactly. I said here, it's like she's ordering off a menu, calling takeout. You know what I mean? Like nothing. Of course, emergency services were dispatched right away. But by the time the paramedics arrived at the bedsit, there was nothing they could do for poor Lexi. Her lips were blue, her skin was pale and cold to the touch. And when they tried to open her jaw to administer CPR, her mouth was tightly shut, indicating that rigor mortis had already begun to set in, which meant that little Lexi had been gone for quite some time. So rigor mortis typically begins to set in within 2 to 6 hours after death, and the process generally follows this timeline. There's initial onset, which is within the first 2 to 6 hours after death. Small muscles, such as those in the face, are usually affected first, which is why they couldn't open her jaw. The next step is full development or peak rigidity, and this is when rigor mortis becomes fully established throughout the entire body, approximately 12 hours after death.
And that's like you're fully stiff in whatever position you were in.
Correct.
Which is, I remember learning they had to like break bones to get people into coffins. I was like, what? They're
well,
dead.
eventually it straightens out. So the next
Oh, it does?
well, the next step is what's called the duration phase. The state of rigor mortis can last for about 24 to 48 hours, depending on various factors like ambient temperature and the individual's physical conditions before death. And then the resolution stage, which is, after this period, the muscles begin to relax as the body's tissues start to decompose.
So weird.
Yeah. According to the results of the initial postmortem examination conducted on little Lexi, cause of death could not initially be determined. But of course, suspicion fell firmly on Louise Porton. However, this is unbelievable. After a very brief and clearly insufficient investigation by the Warwickshire police, Lexi's death was chalked up to an accident, and her initial case was officially closed.
Wow.
In true Louise Porton form, immediately following the death of her child, she spent the next day accepting 41 friend requests on the dating app Meet Me, while direct messaging men on another app called Badoo. She messaged one man saying, "My little girl passed away yesterday," before going on to discuss tattoos and making arrangements to have sex the next day. Louise told all of the men she messaged that day that her little girl had died, hoping to solicit sympathy in the form of extra cash.
You're convinced at this point she's a sex addict,
Yeah,
right?
as we're going into it and as I'm learning more listening to you,
Yeah.
I think I've come around to that now.
When I first came in, somebody was like, think of the worst thing that's ever happened to you and how soon after that you were drinking again.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the worse the thing is and the shorter the gap of time, the more
telling it is that you have an addiction.
Yeah, I crashed my father's car, which I stole on the Northern State Parkway at 5 a.m. Left, I took the car drunk. I used to steal cars out of my driveway.
Mm.
I don't know why.
Because you were not thinking.
I had a car though.
Oh.
You would think I'd be stealing the car that was in the back because there was it was 4 cars in the driveway sometimes. I remember getting into my sister's car once and just leaning on the horn at 4 o'clock in the morning, somebody move this car behind me.
Goodness.
But I got into that car accident and then I drank that night.
Mm.
Yeah, no time at all.
Yeah.
So this is sad.
It is sad. She even set up at this point a GoFundMe page under the guise of covering the costs of Lexi's funeral and sent the link to all of her clients on the dating/modeling apps.
Wow.
Meanwhile, in a perhaps not so shocking display of insensitivity, Louise was observed by the funeral director at the funeral home laughing and flirting with a man on FaceTime while arranging the details of her daughter's funeral.
Like the people who did cocaine in the bathroom at my friend Mike's funeral.
Oh, yeah. You talked about that.
Yeah, I probably would have been doing the same thing if I hadn't gotten sober by that point.
Yeah.
Would have been doing the same exact thing.
Oh my goodness. It really is out of your control.
You can do things to mitigate it, but
I feel like I'm saying, I guess when you're in the throes of it, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. No, there's no, it doesn't. So part of why it's difficult to be a good person universally is because you forget you're supposed to be a good person because you're wrapped up in your own shit. When you are active, it's not even there's this phrase that people like to use, play the tape through, as far as where this will lead up. You're not fucking pressing play on any tape. You don't even know where the tape is. You don't even know that the tape exists. Mm. You're just not, and then you are. There's no thought of even trying to talk yourself out of it. And if there was, it doesn't work.
Yeah. Just 3 weeks after Lexi's heartbreaking death, which at this stage was considered an inexplicable and tragic accident, Louise checked into a hotel with Scarlett on February 1st.
Oh, Scarlett is still...
Correct at this stage. Louise told her sister Karen that she needed to get out of her apartment because she couldn't stop picturing Lexi's little body lying dead on the floor. Karen, who had spent the day with Louise and Scarlett, noticed that 17-month-old Scarlett had uncharacteristically fallen asleep twice during the day. Concerned, she begs Louise to take Scarlett to a doctor, especially given that her sister had just died from some unknown respiratory causes 3 weeks earlier.
Yeah.
But Louise assured Karen that she would keep an eye on Scarlett and take her to the hospital if necessary later that night. CCTV footage from the hotel lobby, which I've seen, shows Louise carrying Scarlett into the hotel. And that is the last time that poor baby was ever seen alive again. Between 7:50 and 9 p.m., Louise sent several messages to various men alluding to the possibility of losing a second child and that she was feeling worried. Then at 9:53 p.m., she messaged a man named Patrick asking for him to send her 30 pounds for gas so that she could drive her young daughter to the hospital. Then she messaged a different man saying, this is a quote, "Taking Scarlett up to the hospital in a bit. She ain't well. She had flu like me. If Scarlett goes bad, I need your support. I can't deal with this alone again." End quote. Then at 9:57 p.m., Louise was seen leaving the hotel with Scarlett in her arms. Not sure in that CCTV footage if Scarlett was alive. I don't think she was. She drove around for a bit, stopped for gas, and then at 10:20 p.m. was seen going into a little kiosk type of store. There, she again called the non-emergency line, 111, and told the operator she was on the way to the hospital with her sleeping child. She expressed concern for her child's well-being, citing the recent death of her daughter, Lexi, from an unknown illness just 3 weeks earlier. The operator instructed Louise to check on her sleeping daughter, at which point Louise indicated that, shock and awe, her baby was not breathing. The operator provided instructions for resuscitation and dispatched an ambulance. Later, a security guard who worked at a nearby parking lot testified that he saw no obvious signs of distress from Louise, who had her car parked nearby in a shopping center, so he could see her as all of this was happening.
Mm-hmm.
The first paramedic arrived at 10:30 p.m., and what he found will haunt him for the rest of his life. Because lying still in the front passenger seat of Louise's car was a 17-month-old baby girl not breathing. Her chest did not rise and fall with life, and her beautiful eyes were blank. Still, the paramedic immediately began CPR as an ambulance pulled up to the scene. Another paramedic remarked that the child was freezing and completely lifeless. Her eyes were fixed open and dilated, and her blood sugar was extremely elevated, indicating a stress response in her body. Sadly, there was no question about it. Scarlett was gone. The hospital reported that the baby had been deprived of oxygen for an extended period of time and officially declared her dead at 11:31 p.m. A nurse named Emma Pugh was assigned to watch over Louise, a standard practice when a parent experiences the heart-wrenching devastation of losing a child. However, Emma noticed that Louise was not exhibiting any of the typical signs of extreme distress that she had come to expect in such situations from parents. Now, not everyone reacts the same way to grief or shock. People express emotions differently, and expecting a universal reaction can be unfair and misleading. And this is especially true in the context of like police interviews or investigations involving family members of potential suspects. Not everyone's going to exhibit, signs of distress, like pulling out their hair, screaming, upending tables. So I'm just saying, just generally judging someone's reaction based solely on these expectations can lead to inaccurate conclusions. Mm-hmm. That being said, Louise's behavior absolutely raised red flags for Nurse Emma in a very, very big way. In her experience in that role, she'd never come across such a cool, composed, seemingly unmoved mother who had just lost their child, who seemed more interested by chatting with men on her phone than she did in grieving the fresh loss of her now second child.
Yeah, that's crazy.
At this stage, an official police investigation was launched, given the almost back-to-back deaths of two young and healthy siblings. Forensic medical examiners were called in to examine the bodies of both girls. It was determined that both girls passed away from deliberate airway obstruction. 3-year-old Lexi exhibited subtle pinch marks around her nose and scratch marks on her neck, suggesting a struggle, meaning she was likely attempting to pry her mother's hands off her neck. 17-month-old Scarlett displayed more obvious signs of a traumatic death by strangulation, with bruising around the outside of her neck and internal bleeding in her lungs, as well as in the soft tissue around her neck muscles. Additionally, blood was discovered on Scarlett's pillowcase at the hotel.
Killing your children. Horrible. Terrible. Doesn't get any worse than that.
No.
Until you consider the fact that she murdered them with her bare hands. While they struggled against her.
It's so bad. I have no words. It's so bad. Needless to say, Louise Porton was questioned on March 20th, 2018. She, of course, immediately claimed to have not been responsible for her daughter's deaths, shouting at the arresting officers, "Why would I kill my kids?" But there was no doubt, in anyone's mind at this point that Louise Porton had murdered her children. However, incredibly, there wasn't enough evidence at this stage to arrest her. So Louise Porton, who was clearly guilty of maternal filicide, was released back into the wild.
Maternal filicide. Oof.
Pop quiz.
Okay.
Upon her release and following this initial police questioning, what did Louise do?
Let's hear these choices.
Peach of shit.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, from the archives.
What was that, episode 3 or 2 or 1?
Issei Sagawa, so I think maybe 3 or 4, yeah.
Oh my God, a real peach of shit. Because you called him a peach.
And you said peach of shit, and I blew right past it because...
Oh, peach of shit.
Per usual, spelled U-J-E.
Per uge.
I was enthralled with the case.
Yeah. Oh my God.
So what did she do after this initial police questioning? A, dress up as a little girl, including pink hair ties and sparkly purses, and advertise fetish sex. B, message one of her clients who was an attorney, promising free sex for the rest of his life in exchange for legal representation. C, attempt to sell all of Lexi and Scarlett's clothing on Facebook for a profit.
C.
Yeah.
I hate that I know addiction so well.
Yeah, you've gotten every single pop quiz right, I think.
I missed one.
Oh, yeah.
But I got it on the second try.
Yeah, so why? Why that?
It's just like the most callous move of all three. Is just like completely removed from or devoid of any human emotion whatsoever. Just like gotta, do they talk about her using drugs at all?
No, not in the research that I did. I didn't see anything about substance abuse issues. It's again, everything just points to sex addiction.
No, 100%.
But the comorbidities, as I flubbed earlier and said comorbidities or whatever I said.
Comorbidities.
No, I mean, I'll take another crack when we're done because I'm curious if there's more information out at this point. I don't think so. It's not like this is hot off the press, but I don't remember seeing anything about substance abuse. For 20 pounds, Louise even offered to deliver her children's clothing to buyers.
The clothing.
She also posted a photo online with the caption, "Fuck the haters and smile."
Yeah.
For the next year, the Warwickshire police worked tirelessly to gather enough evidence to bring this vile piece of human shit to justice. And thank goodness they did just that. In January of 2019, Louise was formally arrested on charges of murdering Lexi Draper and Scarlett Vaughn.
Yeah.
When Louise's trial began in August of that same year, she entered a plea of not guilty in spite of overwhelming evidence to prove otherwise. Opening the Crown's case at the start of the trial, prosecutor Oliver Saxby indicated that specialist doctors could find no natural reason for either child's death. The prosecution also revealed testimony from Louise's landlady, Leanne Bradley, who was often left with the children when Louise would be out partying with various men. The landlady indicated to the police that Louise was doing, quote, whatever she could not to have them with her. To that end, prosecutor Saxby made the following statement to the jury. In the context of two unexplained deaths consistent with deliberate airway obstruction, it is hard not to draw the conclusion that, for the defendant, at times, her two children got in the way of her doing what she wanted, when she wanted, and with whom she wanted.
Yeah.
In other words, she killed her children because she wanted to be free to pursue men and sex for money. Jurors heard about how Louise Porton had accepted 41 friend requests on a dating app just a day after Lexi died, and that she took topless selfies in the hospital bathroom, and that she hinted at Scarlett's death before it even happened, and that she was overheard laughing and FaceTiming with a man while planning Lexi's funeral. But the real linchpin in this case, in terms of evidence, was the number of incriminating internet searches found to have been made on Louise's cell phone on January 4th, which was the day Lexi was initially discharged from the hospital after being diagnosed with a chest infection. Her internet search history from that day included the following. Can you actually die if you have a blocked nose and your mouth is forcibly closed with tape? What causes children to have seizures? Is it true you shit yourself when you die? How long after drowning can someone be resuscitated? How long does it take a dead body to go cold? During the trial, Louise Porton denied wrongdoing and read the following prepared statement. My children were never an inconvenience to me, and I accommodated my lifestyle and personal life around them. I still don't know how my daughters died or what caused it. After a 5-week trial at the Birmingham Crown Court, 23-year-old Louise Porton was correctly found guilty by a jury of her peers and sentenced to serve a minimum of 32 years in jail.
Oh, that's right, the UK.
Anjali Shergill, senior Crown prosecutor for the West Midlands, said in a statement issued after the jury's verdict, quote, "This is a deeply unsettling case involving the death of 2 very young children at the hands of their mother. We will never be able to say for certain why Louise Porton killed her children. The lack of emotion she has shown throughout the proceedings has been disconcerting. She has robbed her daughters of their lives and denied their father the opportunity to know them." The sentencing judge, Mrs. Justice Yip, described Louise's actions as evil and calculated and told the court that Louise had no medical history or mental disorder that goes any way to explaining what happened in this case. She added, and this is a quote, "One way or another, you squeezed the life out of each of your daughters, only calling the emergency services when you knew they were dead." At sentencing, the judge also issued the following statement. "These were blameless young children who were plainly vulnerable and ought to have been able to rely on their mother to protect and nurture them. Instead, you took their young lives away." Now, let's talk psychology, okay?
Yes.
Reports indicate that Louise Porton had no diagnosed mental illness at the time in which she committed these atrocious crimes, for which she demonstrated a complete lack of remorse, shame, or guilt.
Is that because she didn't go to the doctor or?
No, she was assessed.
Oh, and after she was arrested?
Yes.
Okay.
According to psychologist Dr. Jane McCartney, when parents go on to kill their children, which is a horrific act known as filicide, which I mentioned earlier, they are typically in a state of psychosis at the time in which they commit the crime, which may cause hallucinations, delusions, or confused thoughts. But in Louise's case, there were no obvious signs of psychosis. What there are obvious signs are narcissistic traits like self-importance, a need for admiration, exploitative behavior, and a lack of empathy. According to Dr. McCartney, Louise also displayed signs of borderline personality disorder. Her relationships were marked by instability, evidenced by her fluctuating engagement and detachment with her family and her various suitors, we'll call them.
Yeah, she valued her activities more than her children's lives.
Correct. Her impulsive behavior, such as bringing clients into the home and leaving her children unsupervised, indicate a pattern of reckless decision-making without considering the consequences. Additionally, her emotional responses were atypical, with a notable lack of distress in situations that typically elicit strong emotional reactions, suggesting possible emotional dysregulation. Remember her 999 calls?
Mm-hmm.
These elements all align with borderline personality disorder traits, which is not to suggest that all individuals with BPD go on to kill.
Of course.
Of course. At trial, Louise did admit to the fact that she found it difficult to show emotion or form emotional attachments. Louise Porton was clearly capable of looking after her children, as they didn't show any obvious signs of neglect or abuse, but it seems to me that she simply did not want to.
Mm-hmm.
Lexi and Scarlett's father, Chris Draper, who was never even permitted to meet Scarlett, said that their deaths had left him broken and with nothing to live for. In a victim impact statement read to the court, he said, "Why did Louise do something so evil to our beautiful daughters? You were their mother, the person supposed to care for them, protect and love them. They were just an inconvenience to you. How could you do this? I sit and think day and night, and I can't understand why my 2 little girls were taken away because Louise wanted to sleep around. No punishment will ever be enough, as I will never get my daughters back." All the photos of those precious little girls captured their radiant smiles and adorable little matching outfits, each image a testament to their innocence and the joy that they brought to those around them, all except their mother, it would seem. Lexi, with her big, beautiful brown eyes and her Mickey Mouse sweater, always had her arm wrapped protectively around Scarlet, embodying the love of a devoted big sister. Lexi and Scarlet will never have the chance to grow up, to experience the simple joys of childhood. No more laughter during playdates, no schoolyard friendships, no birthday parties filled with cake and balloons. They will never have the opportunity to explore their dreams, whether it be dancing ballet, learning to ride a bike, or pursuing passions that could have shaped their futures and changed the world. They will remain forever young, their potential and unique light extinguished far too soon. And as we end this case, I want to leave off on a quote that I once heard that for me felt right given our coverage of Lexi and Scarlett. Because regardless of how far away they lived from us in particular, or how long ago this heartbreaking journey ended for them, their tragic loss touches us all, and we mourn their absence now together, all of us. And the quote says, "There is no footprint too small to leave an imprint on this world."
Mm.
Lexi and Scarlett may have been here for only a brief time, but the love they shared and the lives they touched leave a lasting imprint on all of our hearts. And they will be remembered
They
accordingly.
absolutely will.
And that's the case.
Wow.
Almost didn't make it at the end.
That was horrible.
That was terrible.
It was interesting,
Mm.
but not easy.
No, not at all easy. So, yeah.
Heartbreaking.
Yeah, I actually read that Louise's mother, Sharon, who we know obviously did some questionable things in her life, like leaving her family,
Yeah.
died by suicide after this happened. So it's just, the tragedies just keep going.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if the mother left, Louise killed her children. They both wanted to do what they wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
One was obviously less impactful than the other, but maybe not because maybe not because she went on to do this. Not saying that. I mean, people get abandoned by their parents all the time, and it's sad, obviously. But there's always so many elements to it. It's such a prism of fucking personality, environment, psychological factors, everything. There's no way. That's why it's so hard to
It's a perfect storm. It has to be a perfect storm.
Yeah.
It is very unusual to put your finger on one reason and say, this is why this person did that.
No, you
or
can't.
This event happened in this person's past. And that's
And here's how we can prevent it, because that's ultimately what we want, but it doesn't happen.
It's recognizing all the signs, or as many signs as you can, and addressing them.
Yeah.
So rest in peace, Lexi and Scarlett. Do you have a Tank's titty for us? Maybe you can get us out of this head state that probably most of us are in right now.
I do have a Tank's tidbit.
Okay, let's go.
You ready for it? Obviously, 99% of my notes are addiction related, so hard to choose just one. Okay. So I'm going to do 10.
Okay.
No, I'm just kidding. Imagine another hour of podcasting. There's this question addiction makes people answer. And it says basically, does it matter what you're bound by? Does it matter what you're bound by? Whether it's a chain and a lock, or a spider thread, or a thread of a spider, you're still bound. And there's this study that they did, which I think we actually spoke about recently. I can't remember if we did or not. I know I spoke to somebody about it. It involved rats. Okay.
It must have been me.
Yeah, it probably was. They had these rats in a cage, and they left the door open, and every time a rat went to go get out of the cage, it got zapped, right? So eventually, obviously, the rats stopped trying to get out of the cage. But then those rats had babies. They put the baby rats in a cage, and they left the door open. No rat tried to escape because it was the
generational trauma.
It was in them. There's also a study with bugs that jumping bugs that if you raise them in a 10-inch tall container and you let them out, they'll never jump higher than 10 inches tall.
Wow.
So this question of what are you bound by? It almost, it's people look for an excuse or a reason for why they are the way they are. And I'm not saying it doesn't matter. In the broader sense, I am saying when you're trying to change, it doesn't matter. There's all kinds of reasons people are the way they are. Ultimately, if you want to, I know this gets touchy with people because there are crimes that are committed where the victim had absolutely nothing to do with the crime committed. The question is, how long, do you want to wait before you forgive that person, as tough as it may be? Or are you going to let it run your whole life, which people absolutely do. People let much less run their entire life. A small transgression by somebody, they let run their whole life. But I'm thinking a lot about just leaving it all and just moving forward.
So it takes forgiveness.
Yeah, forgiveness is a big part of it. Forgiveness of self is huge because you can keep beating yourself down, like you mentioned in the episode. There's at some point you got to say haven't I suffered enough?
Right.
Whether at the hands of somebody else or at the hands of my own inability to let things go, resentment, whatever. Again, I'm not saying anybody should or shouldn't do anything because that is all your life. That's your life. If you want to hang on to the resentment because you think the person deserves it, do it, but just know that it's affecting you way more than it's affecting them.
Right.
Right? So whatever you're bound by, release it.
Maybe like it's hard to drive forward if you're constantly looking in the rearview mirror.
Yeah, impossible. You'll crash.
Right.
So it's like, it almost makes me, it conjures up an image of like someone holding on to the chain. Whether you're holding on to the chain or a strand of a piece of string, you don't get released by the thing you're bonded to. You have to release it.
I got it.
You
Yeah.
know? So
Go.
that's what I've been thinking about.
Very good. Thank you.
That's what I was thinking like.
That's what I'd be thinking like. Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, hopefully that helps somebody
Yeah.
who's struggling with feeling trapped or like, I don't know if I said this on another episode, but your foot being nailed to the floor around something.
Mm-hmm.
Like you feel like, not literally, obviously, but like your foot's nailed to the floor, whether it's something that happened, a compulsion, an addiction, an event you can't let go, whatever, and you walk around and you feel like you're seeing things, and you're moving, but you're not. You feel like I'm going places, I'm getting somewhere, but ultimately you'd never have left this event that shaped your life.
Yeah.
And that's like, I get it. I'm doing a lot of that work right now, which is why I'm thinking about it so much.
Mm-hmm.
And it's difficult, but it's also necessary. Like Cooper said in Interstellar, that's impossible. No, it's necessary.
Nice.
By the way, 10-year anniversary of that movie coming out just passed.
Oh, I thought it was going to be in theaters and we were all going to go.
One has nothing to do with the other.
Okay.
The 10-year anniversary of the movie being released.
Yes, and I thought they were re-releasing it on the 10-year anniversary.
Around. No. It's in December.
I think I sent it to you because I thought it was coming out and you said, yeah, they keep delaying it.
They did. It was supposed to come out months ago.
Right.
Well,
whenever it comes
out.
It was
on or around the 10-year anniversary.
You're going to get movie salad and go, right?
Yes, we are. And yes, we will. And thank you for listening. And thank you for doing all the hard work of the research and the emotional labor of, I don't know how you researched that case.
It was a tough one. Thank you.
I'm sure it was.
And yeah, thank you everybody so much for listening and we'll see you next time.
Yeah. If you're still here, the secret word is ignite.
Sick.
Just made it up right now.
Thanks for listening.
So comment on YouTube or over on Patreon. Just hit us with an ignite and we'll know you made it to the end. I'm curious to see how many people are still here. Thank you for listening. We'll see you guys at the next episode. Bye.
Bye.